Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Dorothy here from the CCMA. You're very welcome to this morning's webinar with part of our Ask the Expert series. As always, going to let people log in. We're going to give it a couple of minutes. I'm delighted to welcome our guest this morning, Brian Farrelly. And I said I'd have to go to his bio so I don't get his title wrong. So Brian is Head of Operating Model Transformation, Global CMB Data and Analytics in the Global Commercial Banking of HSBC. So a very long title, but well deserved, I know, Brian. And Brian has obviously worked in the IT industry in Ireland for over 20 years and has previously worked with BT and AIB. And actually, that's where our paths crossed when Brian was with BT. So this morning, we're going to talk about a couple of things, and it's going to be a little bit different in that we really want to make this webinar as engaging as possible. So Brian's going to talk to 3 or 4 topics. One is what's driving the change in work practices. The other is the whole debate that's currently going on versus the home versus the office question. How we organise ourselves around work and what's coming next. And I know I normally on these webinars ask for you to put up questions as we go through it, but we also are hoping to make this as engaging as possible, as I said, and we're looking for you to put in your views and your observations. So if you agree or disagree with Brian, let us know. And we do, as I say, want to make it interactive. Obviously, we're also very happy to take questions and delighted to see, I see some of your previous AIB colleagues registering and signing in there. And we know also we have some of the guys from Ludgate on this morning, and we were just talking about that before we came on the call in this whole area, which Brian's going to talk about, which is the collaboration piece and the difficulties around that in the current work structure with people working from home and working remotely. So I'm sure Dara and some of the guys from Ludgate might have some opinions they'd like to share on that or some views. So we'd be obviously happy for you to join in the conversation as we go through the chat. So as I say, we want to make it interactive. Please put up any questions, any comments, any observations, and we'd be delighted to discuss it in more detail. So I'm going to hand over to Brian now. He's going to chat, and as I say, as we go through it, I can put any comments, observations, questions to him. So feel free to do that. And always sorry, forgot to say hello and good morning to Niamh. So Niamh is here from WSI, as always, keeping an eye on things and making sure everything goes to plan. So I'm going to hand over to you now, Brian. I'm going to close down my camera so they'll just have the pleasure of seeing your face and your lovely picture of Muhammad Ali in the background. So
yeah,
we'll let you take over, and I'll come on as we have questions or any comments or observations.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you. Yes, my picture of Muhammad Ali, pride of place on the wall, and one of my heroes. Thank you. Look, thank you for asking me to say a few words. I have some content. I'd much prefer to interact, have a conversation. If people have questions, let's just make it an interactive session. You don't want to be spending the whole time just talking away. It'd be good to get some feedback. Welcome to my ex-colleagues in AIB. It's nice to see people on. I had a great couple of years in AIB. And also Ludgate, as you mentioned, that's a fantastic new facility after opening at Skibbereen. I'm very interested to see it myself. So I obviously this is a ways of working. I don't profess to, I know it's an expert series. I don't necessarily profess to be an expert in ways of working, but I suppose I have a fair bit of experience in different ways in and around this space, and happy to share my perspectives and experience. I've been in and around the technology sector for 25 years or so. As Dorothy mentioned, I'm currently working in a transformation role in data and analytics with HSBC Bank. So, very, very large global bank, and we're bringing 2 major parts of the bank together. We're transforming in a big way, but at the center of that is data, and data literacy is key to the future of the bank, and the bank's decided that we need to be a data-driven organization, and because data essentially is the fuel for a digital organization. So it's an exciting place to be. But I mean, if I back up a little bit and we talk about experts, and I have huge respect for people who are genuine experts in a field, but I think something else in the future of work, something is happening here, that there's a new breed of individual emerging, and I'd call it kind of an expert generalist, and maybe I suppose I'd be more in that space, and I think probably a lot of people on the call might be in that kind of space where we need people who bring things together, knit things together, help articulate the way forward, bring people along a path, trust others to deliver, and enables others to do well. And I think there's a kind of there's more and more of those types of individuals in the workforce, needed in the workforce, as we move into, some of the things I'm going to talk about now, and the way work is changing. So I've only one objective for this, and if I can leave you with something, there's probably something already maybe in your head that I awaken for you, or maybe give you one new thought. I have 4 points to make. I'll summarize them, as I go, and I'll summarize them again at the end, just so as you can kind of, be clear about what I'm trying to get across. So 4 points. So just walk down through them very quickly. So the first question is around, what's the big trend here as we reflect on COVID? Is COVID the big trend, or is there something else? That's the first thing I'm going to talk about. Second thing is, it's the where do we work from? This question of, is it home? Is it the office? Etc. What's the mix? How are we going to get right? Just want to maybe just give a few views on that. The third question is around how we're organizing ourselves around our work. How, the nature of the way we're structured is fundamentally changing, and it's really, really interesting. And then the final point is around, some green shoots. There's a piece of research that Dorothy is going to send around after this, that HSBC has done, and there's some fairly positives coming out of it about the kind of reaction of companies to what's going on right now. So a lot of empathy is emerging. So I said, firstly, on major trends. My first point is, COVID-19 isn't the start of something. I think it's personally, it's obviously, these are all personal views. It's an event. It's accelerated something bigger. That's been happening across industries and geographies for a while. It's brought it into sharp focus. It's an event like, I suppose, like financial crisis or dot bomb back in the 99, 2000 era. It changes the dynamics, but there's a bigger trend at play. And if you know the French economist Thomas Piketty, who's done a fantastic piece of work, Capital in 21st Century, and when he looks at the patterns going back over a number of centuries, he talks about super cycles, and I think we're probably, what we're talking about is something, we're in a super cycle, maybe, which are sort of 30-year cycles, and COVID has accelerated at that particular cycle, because the nature of work is changing. If the government issued a paper in 2019, and he talked about Future Jobs Ireland, and the level of uncertainty that's there, and they started to predict, where we get to, or where we needed to get to by 2025. A couple of points that came out was, number one, the need to embrace innovation and technological change. And if you look at what's happened with COVID, and we've effectively accelerated overnight with deploying people from home, improving SME productivity. And if you look at what's happening probably with COVID, you're seeing small businesses are changing their models on the fly, and completely changing the way they operate. Enhancing skills and attracting talent, and these are the 5 things that were called out as the kind of key enablers for the government for 2025 for the workplace. I think what we have is an acceptance of remote working, means that we can now cast the net wider to get our skills. Increasing participation in the work in the labour force. I don't think we have the same reliance on cities. The assumption that you needed to get to Dublin to be part of it, I think, has gone away. And transitioning to a low carbon economy. And I think what we've seen now in the last period of time is the ritual of the commute is perhaps gone forever. So what I'd say is those 5 things that are part of the future of work. And I just say, if you need to look at that paper, it's called Future Jobs Ireland. It was issued in 2019. If you Google it, you'll get it on the government website. It's interesting because arguably we've kind of we fast forwarded to that point. So what's the big trend? What's the sort of super cycle that I mentioned? And I think it's around the deployment of digital technologies, and obviously that's not a controversial thing to say. And it's the emergence of customer experience. And I don't need to teach this industry about customer experience. When customer experience kind of arrived, it could have been a fad, but it's anything but. I'd argue that it's the leading indicator of everything we're doing in our businesses. So my first point is we're in a generational shift It's driven by digital technologies. It's underpinned by customer experience. It started well before COVID, but COVID has accelerated it. Okay, and the big shift is you've got to adapt your business or you die. And I think organizations have returned to first principles over the last couple of years. I have some AIB colleagues on the phone. AIB is a great case in point. Really has spent a lot of time going back to understand its purpose and its values, and it's there to serve customers. And that was really, really good. When I was in AIB, I really enjoyed that aspect of it. But I think every business has done something similar. What's our purpose? Why do we exist? What are our values? Are we properly living them? Are we authentic? Do our customers feel and believe that? So summary of point one is that's the big thing that's happening. COVID is obviously an accelerator, but the reimagining of businesses in a digital world and the reimagining of customer experience and how you serve customers is the big trend, in my humble opinion. Dorothy, if there's any questions, I don't know, I'll pause there. If there's anybody wants to ask a question or pick up on that point.
Yeah, I think one of the things I was going to talk to you, and it's actually interesting, we were talking about this before, Brian. We actually had an employee engagement workshop yesterday, and the whole section of it was about purpose and values in terms of employee engagement, which is interesting in the context of what you're speaking about, that for people now working remotely to be engaged and committed, that they have to buy into what the organization is there to do and what the values are that are there to support what they're doing. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about, you talk about this expert generalist role. Like, are you looking for those type of people? Are you finding those type of people? What skills do you think they need to have to be able to do that job?
Yeah, I'll probably I'm going to come to that in a moment on a separate point. I'll probably cover that. I'll cover that off. But I suppose the simple answer to it is people working in silos. Everybody has a piece of the answer. Is a problem. What we're moving to is we're organizing our workforce into multidisciplinary pod structure, i.e. you have all the voices around the table in the early part of a conversation about how you're going to create value for your customer. It used to be a case of it was a very kind of linear process. I did my bit, you did your bit, and there was a lot of handoffs in between, and a lot of value was lost. And by the time you got to deliver something, it wasn't appropriate anymore. The need to get immediate feedback from the marketplace, immediate feedback from customers, and to iterate on things, change things quickly and in small pieces, and then accelerate or else stop. So, the ability to be able to fail fast or stop doing things is really about moving at pace. And the only way you can move at pace is to bring all the different skills together. So that's why the expert generalist is where you have a bunch of people with different types of skills. You need somebody who starts to knit that together, asking the big questions. How are we organizing around value? What does value look like? What are the business priorities? So that's what I'm saying. It's people that can bring those kind of voices, those, particularly in the technical domain, people, all the different technical experts together. But I'll come back to that point again, Dorothy, in a couple of minutes if you like.
Perfect. Thanks, Brian.
Second point is this whole question of working from home, working from the office. I think obviously the opportunity of working from home has probably been staring us in the face for many years, and because our habits were failing of commuting and doing the 9 to 5. I think it was kind of dead. It was dead on its feet. We were still doing it, and it's maybe old-fashioned attitudes were holding us back, and potentially technology was holding us back, because I don't think technology was necessarily ready 12 months ago or 24 months ago to be able to do what we've done in the last couple of months. So I think, is it a home? Is it the office? Well, it's both, and I'd also argue that it's a third space. If the home has its place and it's obviously good for certain types of work, and the office obviously has its place, in bringing people together and really kind of level setting and communicating and probably being able to reward success and all those good things. But I'd argue that there's a third space, and it's just a view that creativity is not going to happen in your home, nor is it going to happen in your office. And I think creativity is the thing that probably is going to drive the future of work mostly, because in a world where everything is being disrupted continuously, creativity and working with probably other companies, whether they be partners or customers or other collaborators, is the key. And you're not going to probably do that in your office, and you certainly won't do that in your home. So question I pose is, what's your third space? Is it Ludgate? I know the guys are on the call. Is it a space like that? Is it a customer site? Is it a branch office? Is it a coffee shop? Is it a supplier site? Is it a walk in the park? But I think, and I certainly think about that when, in the ordinary course of events, I try to get out and about and spend time with companies who we can work together and partner with and find new ways to explore value. And I'd suggest that probably most people have a third space that probably they need to incorporate into their creative process. So when we get the opportunity to go back to our offices, I don't think we're just going to go back to our offices and pick up where we left off. We're going to ask ourselves the question: why am I in the office? To what end? If I'm at home, why am I at home? To what end? Is it facilitating my work-life balance, or is it because I'm doing a concentrated piece of work? And I suppose that's where the location thing will be not so much about location, but it'll be about what I'm trying to achieve at that moment in time. And we'll design our work around, those, I just call it those three spaces: homework and the third space. So I'm not sure if I'll take a pause, Dorothy, if there's anything anybody wants to ask anything.
Yeah, the observation I was going to make was that Future Jobs Ireland report. There was actually an opportunity to make submissions in the last couple of weeks, and CCMA made a submission just on behalf of the industry in terms of our views. And we had done research in July, and the challenges that people are having, things like broadband obviously was a given, but also this whole engagement piece. And we actually did talk about the collaboration piece and sort of suggested that, in towns across the country where there's lots of empty places and facilities on main streets, that maybe that's where we should be looking for these type of spaces that people can go to from different companies, either use it just for their company opportunities or discussions or meetings, or just, as you say, somewhere that I suppose instills or supports creativity. Because I sometimes think when you go around contact centers and you see these collaboration sort of rooms, it's almost like you go away from your desk and now you turn on the button to get creative, where I think what you're saying is probably more valid, that you need that mindset, but you also need the support mechanism to do it. So it's not just, moving from your desk to a room that has nice bean bags and stuff. There's a bit more to it than that. So I don't know if anybody on the webinar wants to comment on what they may be doing in their organization at the moment to facilitate that collaboration. Again, we had that session yesterday, and somebody talked about, and actually Natasha's just put up a question, and Natasha, I'm going to say somebody talked about a piece of, and Natasha has asked, what collaboration tools would you suggest for replicating the creative and energy you had in the office? And there was a tool mentioned yesterday, which I can't remember the name of, but Natasha, I get a whiteboard, an online whiteboard application that companies are able to use. So I don't know if you have any suggestions on that, Brian, in terms of how you can instill that collaboration while working remotely, as a lot of people are.
I don't have a good answer, to be honest with you. I know we all have a bunch of tools that we're using, Zoom and Slack and whatever. But I haven't come across anything yet that's really effective, to be honest with you, from a collaboration point of view. And I think it's probably one of the biggest issues I personally have right now in the current situation. Like, we can communicate well and coordinate well, but we're not necessarily collaborating well, i.e. driving things on or really workshopping things the way you would in a room. So I haven't seen anything yet that's replaced being in a room for a brainstorm, unless somebody on the call maybe knows something.
Eamon has just said, we leverage Jamboard from Google for brainstorming collaboration, and he's saying that's just a suggestion. And then he said Zoom also has a whiteboard feature. So maybe people want to have a quick look at that. I'll try and get the name in the meantime, Natasha, of the one that was mentioned on the webinar I was on yesterday. And then Kathy asks, Brian, how difficult is it to train and scale a multidisciplinary pod structure, especially given remote working? So this is what you were talking about earlier, about you're putting in place your pod structure.
Very difficult is the short answer. We're on a journey. I think the thing about we're certain that this multidisciplinary kind of pods or this type of working where you bring everybody, we're certain that it's the future. We're absolutely, utterly certain. And I think lots of people, people who've worked in software engineering have already seen the benefits of it. And really we're following the Netflix model and companies like Netflix. That's why they've been so quick to get to the market. And that's how they're so quick to change their propositions and bring new features. It's by working in that way. They've completely changed the game. So big companies like HSBC and others, AIB are moving, actively moving into this model because it's the best. You harness all of the skills highly quickly. You take that pod, it gets aligned to what you're trying to do in terms of your product or what you're trying to do with your customer journeys or your customer propositions. Again, it's back to CX. It's what are we trying to achieve with our product? Why are we trying to achieve it? What are we improving for the customer? Are all the voices in the room, and is all the technical expertise? And just to make it real, when we talk about technical expertise, we would have data people, analytics people, engineering people, and architecture people, plus the likes of UX, UI, designers, plus business owners, product owners. That's what I'm talking about as a multidisciplinary. Plus, you've got your project managers. They all need to be in the same, I'd say, virtual room, but they're working in a pod, and they're working in. I know you like the word pivot, Dorothy. They're pivoting quickly, so they're incrementing. People, I'm sure there's people on this call who know a lot about agile, and so maybe people who don't, but they're using an agile methodology where they're working in sprints. They're on daily stand-up calls. They work in 2-week increments. They measure their progress over those 2 weeks. So they run really fast over a 2 week, then they reflect, then they go again over 2 weeks, and that's where they get pace. And then what that allows them, they're not overly invested in something. If thing is going the wrong direction, or you're getting the wrong reaction from your customers, well then you stop, or you pivot, or you go in a slightly different direction. But it's all about having the right people along that journey, working in short, sharp increments. Okay.
And just on that,
I suppose,
Brian.
Yeah.
Sorry, Gabriella's just asked. So is this design thinking in action, or more than that? And then Kathy has added. It sounds like you need a huge commitment to the execution of this.
Yeah. The commitment to the execution is absolutely enormous, because there's a lot of resistance, because it breaks up the traditional hierarchies in the organization, particularly the IT. I mean, it's what it's effectively doing is taking technology and embedding it in the business. So you're breaking up old IT, and you're embedding it in the way you go to the business. So yes, it's an enormous commitment. You'll get enormous resistance to this. And the other thing about it is it's actually threatening for people at middle to senior levels, because you are empowering people, within the pods. They're completely empowered to make decisions and solve the problem. You're not telling people how to solve it. You're telling what kind of an outcome we're trying to achieve. So it's very empowering for people, and the best ideas win. So simple answer, it's really hard, but we'd be absolutely certain that we need to move more and more towards this type of working. Anything else, Dorothy? Will I?
No, keep
continue?
Going. Great, thanks, Brian. Yep.
Okay, so we've been talking about a little bit about pods and replacing silos, and just to maybe develop that point a little bit further, that means we're less certain about where we're going, but we're more capable of being able to adapt. So we're dealing with the ambiguity. Ambiguity is good in this context. So ambiguity means you're open. We're not supposed to know all the answers, and if we know all the answers, well, probably the questions we're asking are not the hard questions. We're not being searching enough. So in this way of working, kind of curiosity is king. We just need to keep the conversations flowing. We need people, we need our people to navigate this next phase. Sorry, let me just check where I am in my notes. Apologies. I'm going to skip because I think I just covered off.
Finding your place.
I've covered off that. Yeah.
Brian, Kathy has just added, has this led to better diversity?
Well, I think it probably naturally. I mean, diversity probably needs to be dealt with, and you need to be consciously trying to be more diverse in every. I mean, diversity in every way. But yes, I think it lends itself to diversity, and particularly the diversity of thinking and skill set. I mean, if you really what you're doing is accommodating diverse views, and it's not the most senior person in the room or the highest paid person in the room dominating the conversation. It's actually the idea dominates the conversation, and then the idea can come from anywhere. So that is true diversity. We talk a lot about our culture and how we're going to change our culture to be able to, and we use the word empowerment. You are empowered. You're empowered to say this doesn't make sense, or I don't think we're adding value, or I don't think this is going to solve the problem for the customer, or I think this is a waste of time. Doesn't matter who you are, bring that perspective to play, because you have a particular skill set that allows you to make so we encourage critical thinking. I think somebody mentioned there design thinking. Design thinking is fundamental. It's one of the design thinking, if people are familiar with it. It's just it's a way of being kind of customer centric and architecturally led, and a particular process of bringing divergent views and then converging back and building prototypes. So we would use design thinking. But yeah, I think diversity comes naturally with this way of working.
Great, thanks, Brian.
Any other questions?
No, we're okay for the moment.
So I think I'm going to go to sort of the final. So maybe I'll go to my final point. And the research, and Dorothy, I don't know if you're going to distribute the research. There's a paper that HSBC commissioned during the April-May period. It's worth a look at if you get some time, because we surveyed 2,600 customers in 14 different geographies, and the paper is called "Resilience: Building Back Better." And there's some pretty good stuff and good news within the feedback. 4 out of every 5 businesses surveyed said they had grown closer to employees, suppliers, and customers in this period of time. I've spoken to a number of people, major global services providers who, and they said they're experiencing huge empathy from their customers. People are tolerant with each other in terms of what can and can be achieved over the last period of time. So that's obviously a good piece of news. The research also tells us that this will be a kind of catalyzing long-term change, and that change will be focused on culture. The research has told us that the priority for organizations is to focus on building resilience in their people. And it also says that ingraining technology and sustainability into how their businesses operate is key. When it comes to this, what in terms of sustainability, what their priorities are, and this was again from the 2,600 companies. Number 1 is, in terms of being a sustainable business, number 1 is valuing the customer. Number 2 is treating employees well. And number 3 is being able to adapt fast to external events. And that's the findings, and as I say, it's worth a look. So, Dorothy, that's what I have. I'm happy to take questions. I'm not sure what you're like on the time. We're probably close to the time anyway.
We literally have a minute to go, but I'll just come back with an observation that Kathy made. And she said, ambiguity and uncertainty can sometimes enable or lend to more and better listening of different voices, which leads to more creativity. Which I think Very valid point.
Yeah.
We've put up the link there, Brian, to the report, so that's there in the chat box for everybody to see. That hopefully they can access it. And the other thing is, I got the name of that software for the whiteboard, but for some reason the link won't work. I'm just going to send it to Neve, see can she get it to work. And it's called, bear with me, it's just after disappearing from my screen. I think it was Micro or Miro. Was the name of that piece of software. Yeah, miro.com. So just Natasha and anybody else on the call if you want to check that one out. And Brian, for people on the call in the last minute, like what would your advice be to them if they're caught by this idea of the pod structure? Is it that you started in a small area, you test it to show it works, and then you can go on to a bigger type of problem, issue, whatever?
I think not everybody's going to have the luxury of being able to get into pod structures, either physically or even from remote. I think it's the concept is probably more important than the pod structures itself. And is really, and I think as somebody has already said, is actually to listen to the voices in the room, get the best ideas out, but align, your conversations have to be aligned to the value you're trying to create, which is how you're trying to change your customer proposition. It really comes back to customer experience and customer journeys, and that's how you're creating value. And if your conversations are not in that, starting in that space with the right voices, you're already on the wrong track. And I'd say that's to sort of summarize it in one sentence, that would be it. And by the way, if anybody wants to come directly to me on any of this stuff, please do.
Yeah, you're on LinkedIn, Brian. You're pretty easy to find. But if anybody needs your direct contact details, just drop me an email. And I was just going to say, you talk about journey mapping. That actually links in nicely. We're going to be running a journey mapping workshop on the 15th of October. I haven't put the details up on the members area yet, but for anybody who's interested maybe in taking part, please do drop me an email. But the clock has beaten us, Brian. That flew. I told you it would fly. I was saying to Brian earlier, everybody, that I'd say he regretted saying yes to me a couple of weeks ago when he saw that beautiful sunny Friday morning and realised he committed to the webinar. But we really appreciate your time, and I think really thought-provoking, Brian, and I think lots of nuggets of information there for people to think about. So as always, a recording of this webinar will be made available. It'll hopefully be up by Monday, and anybody, as you say, Brian, that wants to get in touch with you directly, you're absolutely happy to have a chat with them.
Very good. Thank you, Dorothy.
Brilliant. Thanks a million. Have a lovely weekend. And thanks, Neve, as always. And everybody, hope you have a safe and happy weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.